Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a really grim, dark fable. We're going to use a bit of Nietzschean philosophy to unpack something terrifying, how a philosophy meant for pure liberation can actually be twisted into a psychological monster. And we'll do this by looking at a chilling dialogue between a mountain sage and a demon trapped inside a mirror. Let's get right into it.
Okay, picture this scene. A young, innocent child holds up a pristine silver mirror. You look into it expecting to see truth, right? But instead, a hungry demon leers right back at you, whispering this terrifying taunt to the sage, "I am your gift, matured." Wow. It's not just a spooky image, it's a total psychological gut punch. The philosophy that the sage originally offered as a beautiful, pure gift has somehow evolved into this horrific monster.
So that mirror actually has a name. It's the speculum mendax, or the false mirror. Now, the child holding it, that represents the core philosophy itself, which is completely pure and innocent. But the mirror is the interface. It represents the flawed, fearful minds of the disciples down below. You see, the corruption doesn't actually live in the truth itself. It lives in the human mind that receives it. It literally twists a tool of liberation into a tool of absolute bondage.
To really grasp how we got to this point, we have to look at a massive contrast. On one side, you have the sage. For 7 whole years, he's sat in mountain silence. He's maintained this icy detachment, acting as a still pool of silent him. But down below, in the valley, his teachings have caused absolute ruin. The tools he gave them for growth, which were supposed to be like a warming forge, have been weaponized into a destructive pyre. So how exactly does a message of peace spark a complete societal collapse?
Well, the answer comes straight from the demon's mocking dialogue. The demon looks at the sage and says, "You offered them an abyss of potential, but they chose to flinch." The sage gave these people the chance for true self-legislation, for unclaimed nobility. But when faced with the terrifying work of mastering their own nature, the villagers looked into that abyss and they blinked. They were just too terrified of what it would actually take to master themselves.
And the scary part? This decay is entirely invisible to the people experiencing it, mostly because it happens across generations. It's a really dark psychological truth that fear, if you leave it unaddressed, eventually disguises itself as morality. So first, you have the original fire of liberation. Then, the fearful minds flinch. Next, rather than outbuilding their own smallness, they codify that cowardice into a moral system, building an idol of sacrifice. And finally, that original truth becomes the demon's leer, the gift matured.
This brings us to the absolute darkest part of their collapse. The demon sneers at the sage, explaining that the villagers didn't just fail. No, they built an idol out of their failure. They called their cowardice virtue. The demon laughs. They completely perverted the concept of discipline just to justify sheer malice. They sacrificed their own neighbors to this demon's reflection, using the sage's very own words to guard their smallness rather than overcome it.
So let's break down how this distortion actually functions mechanically. It always starts when truth is given as a guide to liberate. But when a fearful mind just cannot handle the immense weight of that self-legislation, it flinches. And because a pure teaching simply cannot survive contact with cowardice, it gets instantly metabolized into a tool of fear. What was supposed to be pure inquiry becomes a rigid system of bondage.
Now, philologically speaking, we need to get clear on what this demon actually is. This is das Dämonische. We're not talking about some satanic, external evil invented by enemies. No, it is the unsublimated will to power. It is an amoral, raw, overwhelmingly hungry force. And because the followers were way too weak to master it or wear it properly, they gave it a terrifying face. They essentially saw a monster in the mirror of their own souls and built their entire moral architecture around fleeing from it.
Which brings us right back to the sage's immediate, terrifying crisis on the mountain. In his vision, this shadow self, this unsublimated will to power, rapidly lunges from the silver mirror. It wants to claim the untamed smile of the innocent child holding the glass, the abyss that the villagers feared. It finally reaches out with bared teeth, threatening to swallow the future whole, consuming the very philosophy it had already warped.
And this is the moment everything flips. Seeing that darkness start to bleed onto the boy's face, the sage is hit with a brutal, sickening realization. His 7 years of peaceful mountain detachment, they were actually a cowardly dereliction of duty. He realizes that innocence is not safety. Simple innocence offers absolutely zero protection against a truth that fear has weaponized.
You might be wondering, why is the sage the only one who sees this happening? It's because he possesses what we call the guilty eye. The villagers are totally unaware of their generational rot. To them, the child still smiles, but the founder, he remembers the original intent of the fire. Only this guilty eye of the founder can look past those fake masks of virtue and recognize the mocking grimace of the demon for what it truly is, his own truth, metabolized by fear.
Stepping directly into the shadow's path, the sage makes a radical, unthinkable choice. He abandons his icy detachment completely. To save the boy, he offers his own spirit, which, remember, was once a still pool of silentium, as a new vessel to absorb the rot. He has to prevent this double betrayal from claiming the last spark of pure inquiry, so he chooses to become the living container for the poison his own disciples created.
The very moment the shadow enters him, it triggers a violent, unnatural reaction. 21. In a single heartbeat, 21 years of age are violently stripped from the sage's frame. It's a sudden, terrifying rejuvenation.
Suddenly, his limbs regain the predatory grace of a much younger man, but the cost is absolute. He transformed from being a still pool to a wildfire. His face hardens into this mask of cynical knowledge that no young man should ever possess. He is no longer just the sage, he is now the living speculum mendax. He has actually mastered the demon by becoming its permanent host.
Standing there, infused with the unsublimated will to power, his eyes burn with a really grim vitality. "I have metabolized the fear of the valley," he says, his voice carrying this new hardened edge. The poison of his disciples is now his actual fuel. He looks down at the child, and his gaze carries no warmth at all, only a clear, terrifying vision of what a man becomes when his cruelty is no longer excused.
But right here is where the tragedy hits its absolute climax. The child, who was bright with an innocence that hadn't yet learned how to lie, looks up at the sage's rejuvenated, hardened face. And the child's untamed smile instantly perishes. Why? Because the boy recognizes the very demon's leer he had been carrying up the mountain in the mirror. The broken truth has just taken human form right in front of his eyes. Stumbling backward in sheer visceral terror, the child realizes that the tool of fear and bondage has settled upon the one man he believed could break it. Completely shaken by the sight of a teacher who is now fueled by the valley's poison, the boy's footing actually fails on the jagged edge of the mountain, and he falls to his ruin. It is an absolutely devastating consequence.
And yet, the sage doesn't reach out to study the boy. I know, it sounds harsh, but comfort is the very poison he must now excise from the world. Instead, he begins his necessary return down to the valley. He's going to use the demon's mocking grimace as his own armor against the priests of small comfort. He is descending to counter their bad transvaluation, armed with a hand that will absolutely not flinch from the abyss.
As the sage descends as a 21-year younger shadow, ready to shatter every mirror that dares to reflect a lie, we are left with a really haunting question. What happens when the truth you rely on reflects the lies you refuse to face? This fable challenges all of us to look closely at our own mirrors. Are we actually using our beliefs for growth, or have we metabolized them through fear just to guard our own smallness? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive in today's Explainer. Keep questioning what you see in the mirror,